Imagine spending years working day and night, saving every dollar, and finally buying your dream home, only to have your own mother-in-law tell you that you don't belong in it. Imagine being called useless in the very house you built with your own blood, sweat, and tears. That's my story, and how I fought back when betrayal came knocking at my door.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is about Emmy, a woman who built her sanctuary with hard work and sacrifice, only to face the ultimate betrayal from the people closest to her. What happens when family turns into strangers, and the house you love becomes a battlefield? Stay tuned, because this story is full of drama, heartbreak, and a shocking twist that you won't see coming. And before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us share more powerful stories like this with all of you.
I used to measure success in tiny, practical moments. Quiet mornings when the kettle whistled at just the right time. Invoices paid on schedule. My mother's voice on the phone saying, "Proud of you, Em." Maybe that's why the house meant more than walls and a roof. It was a promise I'd kept to a younger version of myself who once slept under a leaking ceiling, counting coins to stretch a week. In Atlanta's soft, leafy suburbs, our little two-bedroom sat at the end of a cul-de-sac like a held breath. The front steps were brick, a little crooked but honest, and the porch swing creaked like it had stories to tell if you sat long enough to listen. I found it during a week of impossible deadlines, when my eyes were hot from staring at a monitor and my wrist ached from dragging Bezier curves across a tablet. The listing photos were terrible. Bad angles, gray sky, muddy grass. A designer's instinct told me the photographer had missed the soul of the place. I drove over on my lunch break and stood on the porch in August heat, sweat tickling my neck. The moment I pushed the door, the air changed. Not cooler, just kinder. Light fell across the hardwoods in a wash of gold. The layout was simple and stubbornly functional. A real kitchen where a person could cook. A window over the sink that framed a maple tree like a painting. I ran numbers that night with a dull pencil and terror in my throat. My savings were the result of years I didn't like to talk about. A soul-flattening agency job where I learned to deliver brilliance on a stopwatch. Pre-dawn freelancing. Weekends spent adjusting kerning while friends posted beach photos. I could afford the house, just barely, if I believed in myself a little harder than usual. I signed. The pen shook in my hand, and still the line of my name looked sure. James carried the first box over the threshold and said, "Welcome home, Mrs. Architect of our dreams." He grinned that crooked grin he wore when he was proud and trying not to be corny. He'd grown up in a different storm. Parents who fought with slammed doors and the brittle silence afterward. An older brother who never met a rule he didn't break or a spotlight he didn't claim. When James talked about that house, there was always a flinch behind his eyes. Calm to him was not an indulgence, it was survival. We unpacked in a choreography of relief. Mugs first, then blankets, then the cheap lamp that made perfect light for late-night work. By evening, we were on the porch, swinging slow, paper cups of sweet tea sweating onto our palms. The neighborhood hummed with sprinklers and distant lawnmowers, and in that ordinary music, I heard the loudest sound of my life, belonging. I left the agency 2 months later. People called it brave. It felt more like removing a pebble from my shoe after years of pretending it didn't hurt. Freelancing scared me with its blank calendar squares and its raw accountability. If I failed, the failure would have my first and last name on it. But each morning at the desk we'd wedged under the front window, I opened Illustrator like I was opening a door. The ideas came in breathy little bursts at first, then stronger. Clients found me through word of mouth, boutiques that needed a brand with a spine, neighborhood bakeries with frosting smudged dreams, a developer who wanted an app icon that didn't look like every other blue square on the store. Checks arrived slow, then steady. I learned to celebrate the green notifications and survive the quiet weeks without letting panic take the wheel. James did his coding in the second bedroom we'd misnamed office, the way hopeful parents call a spare room nursery. His work voice is different. Lower, slower, like he's explaining a complicated bridge to someone who has to cross it at midnight. His startup built tools for other developers, the plumbing under the internet, so most days were deep and technical, punctuated by bursts of laughter from his teen calls. Between commits and pull requests, he'd pad out to my desk, set a glass of water by my elbow, press a kiss to the crown of my head, and leave without a word. It was our favorite kind of conversation. We made rituals like breadcrumbs we could always follow home. Tuesdays were porch dinners with takeout from the Thai place at the corner. By week 3, the owner waved when he saw our car. Saturdays, we walked to the farmer's market, James making a ridiculous event of selecting peaches, as if choosing gemstones. Sunday evenings, we folded laundry on the bed and told each other our ridiculous little triumphs. I found the perfect font pairing for a vintage soap company. He crushed a bug that had haunted his repo for weeks. This was what love looked like when you weren't trying to wrestle it into a fairy tale. It looked like teamwork and inside jokes and the kind of quiet that healed. On the phone, my mother would ask for house updates like they were chapters in a book she couldn't put down. Did you paint that hallway yet? How's the porch swing holding up? You finally fixed that sticky drawer? She loved the house because I loved it, and because it answered a question that had lived in both our chests since my childhood. Would we ever be safe enough to trust a future? The house said yes in 100 little ways. Maybe that's why, when the first hairline cracks appeared, I told myself they were nothing. Houses settle, after all. So do lives. It started with one conversation that seemed small as a pebble in a shoe, but rubbed something raw if you walked on it long enough. James got a call from his mother late one Wednesday while I was sketching logo variations on tracing paper. I watched his face as he listened, brows knitting, worry pulling down the corners of his mouth. "What's wrong?" I asked when he hung up. She's not doing great, he said. Since Dad passed, it's been lonely. The condo association hiked fees again. She says the place feels like a museum of what used to be. She asked if she could stay with us for a little while, just to figure things out. I nodded before my stomach had time to register protest. Empathy is easiest in the theoretical. Of course, I said. Family, right? James squeezed my hand. "You're a good person, Emmy." "I'm a person who believes in couches and spare keys," I said, trying to joke. We made up the office with fresh linens, moved his desk into the corner of the living room, and told ourselves it would only be for a month. I made a playlist of her favorite old soul records and stocked the pantry with the tea she liked. The night before she arrived, we sat with our knees touching on the porch swing and looked at the light in the windows across the street. "We'll set boundaries," James said. "We'll be kind and clear." "Kind and clear," I echoed. The swing creaked. A breeze picked up, warm as breath. I leaned my head on his shoulder and listened to the faint buzz of summer insects. I heard the house shift, a timber sigh deep in its bones. It sounded almost like a warning, and I told myself it was only wood remembering how to stand. She came on a Friday afternoon, a small woman in a crisp blouse whose iron had bitten every edge. Her luggage was more than I expected for a little while. 2 large suitcases, a box of framed photos, a plastic bin of yarn. She hugged James long and tight, then turned to me with a quick pat that couldn't decide if it was affection or formality. "Emmy," she said, drawing out the syllables like tasting a spice she wasn't sure she liked. "This is kind of you." I said, "Make yourself at home." The phrase felt too generous in my mouth, like giving away something I hadn't meant to offer. At first, we behaved like people in a shared waiting room, polite and a little stiff. She chose the armchair by the window as her post, knitting needles clicking like a metronome for the day. She flipped through magazines and commented on recipes no one was going to try. I cooked simple dinners and offered second helpings. She declined with a sigh that sounded like a comment. Work went on. I fine-tuned a brand for a candle startup whose founder spoke in scents. I want this label to smell like a library. James deployed a feature that cut the startup server costs in half and brought him the kind of email developers print and pin above their desks. We were doing what we'd always done. One pixel, one line, one small miracle at a time. But quiet criticism has a way of thickening the air. It started with questions dropped like paper cuts. "You do this from here?" she asked one afternoon, glancing at my tablet like it was a toy. "Yes," I said, smiling. "Clients video call, I present, we iterate, and they pay for drawings?" "Design," I said. "Strategy. Identity." She nodded like I explained a hobby. "And James? He's still with the computers?" "With the computers," I said lightly, and went back to adjusting the curve on a letter R that refused to behave. At dinner, she told us about a neighbor who had real jobs, with commutes and bosses and parking passes, about the dignity of a desk you didn't assemble yourself. I rinsed plates and stocked them with more force than necessary. After she went to bed, James and I debriefed in whispers in the dark, like campers listening for bears. "He doesn't understand," he said. "She doesn't want to," I replied, softer than I felt.
The house still offered sweetness in the margins. A late-night thunderstorm that wrapped us in rain. A Saturday morning when we found a yard sale 3 doors down and bought a chipped blue vase for $2 that looked perfect on the kitchen table. We kept walking our rituals like a tightrope and waved to neighbors like we weren't learning a new language at home, one with more barbs than words. The first week, I told myself, was an adjustment. The second, a phase. By the third, when I caught myself standing with my hand on the office doorknob like a person touching a gravestone, I admitted something delicate had shifted. Her presence rearranged the gravity in this place. Rooms felt narrower, my workday shorter by slivers of conversation I didn't consent to. Love felt like a test with no study guide. On a Tuesday that smelled like rain, James's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his mouth tightened. "Marcus," he said, and stepped onto the porch to answer. Through the window, I watched him speak. 2 words, then a pause, then a sigh. He came back in with a face I recognized from old stories, the one he wore when the past knocked like it owned a key. "What is it?" I asked, though my body already braced. "They're coming this weekend," he said. "Marcus and Vanessa." "For a visit?" His silence was a smooth, heavy stone. I nodded and told my breath to behave. Outside, the maple leaves turned their paler faces to the sky. Somewhere in the house, a board clicked, as if it too had heard. The porch swing creaked, empty, as the first drop of the storm found the railing and spread like a dark flower. The night after James told me Marcus and Vanessa were coming, I couldn't sleep. The house usually hummed with comfort after dark. The soft tick of the ceiling fan, the distant croak of frogs in the damp Georgia air, James's steady breathing beside me. But that night, the silence was restless, almost hostile. Every creak in the floorboards felt like a reminder that we had invited chaos to stay. I stared at the faint light seeping through the blinds, tracing the square patterns on the wall. My thoughts circled. Marcus never arrived without an angle. Vanessa never smiled unless she was trying to win. And my mother-in-law, already a storm contained by walls, looked ready to break free at the sound of his name. James rolled over, pulling me close. "We'll handle it," he whispered into my hair. His voice was low, steady, but I could feel the tension in his body. "What are we going to handle?" I asked. "You know he's not coming just to visit. He's never just visiting." James didn't answer, but the way his arm tightened around me was answer enough. The next morning, the house was different. My mother-in-law was up before sunrise, clattering pans around the kitchen like a warning bell. She'd made oatmeal, thick, lumpy, unseasoned, and set it on the table like a gift no one had asked for. "Marcus is coming," she said with satisfaction, as though we hadn't heard the night before. "My boy is finally coming for me." She said it with such certainty, her hands folded on the table like she was already halfway out the door with him. James poured coffee, his jaw tight. "He didn't say that, Mom. He just said they're visiting." She waved a hand, dismissing him. "You don't know Marcus like I do. He's been busy, that's all. Vanessa's family has money. They'll take care of me." Her eyes flicked to me, sharp and pointed.
that's what family does. The implication dug under my skin. I wanted to snap back, to remind her that family was already taking care of her, feeding her, housing her, paying her bills. Instead, I forced a thin smile and spooned cold oatmeal into my bowl. The days leading up to the visit were a performance. My mother-in-law polished the picture frames she'd brought with her, all filled with Marcus's smiling face at graduations, weddings, vacations. James as a boy was barely visible in the corners, half cut from the frame. I worked through deadlines at my desk by the window, but my focus blurred. Each time I tried to trace a clean logo line, her voice echoed in my head. Real jobs, real money. Marcus and Vanessa understand. James retreated into his code, headphones on, lines of syntax flowing across his screen like a protective barrier. But I knew him. I knew when his jaw clenched too often, when his posture bent under an invisible weight. His childhood wasn't a story he told often, but it hung in the room now, like smoke. Marcus, the golden child, James, the shadow who cleaned up behind him. One evening, I found James sitting alone on the porch swing, staring at the streetlights. I stepped outside, the boards creaking beneath my feet. "Talk to me," I said gently. He exhaled slowly, eyes still fixed on the street. He always had her attention, always. Even when he screwed up, she found a way to praise him. And me? I was just there, fixing things, covering. Now he's coming here and it feels like being 15 again. I sat beside him, slipping my hand into his. But you're not 15. This is our house, our life. He doesn't get to rewrite that. James finally looked at me, his eyes shadowed but grateful. I just don't want him to take you down with him. I won't let him, I promised. Though part of me wondered if I had any choice. Friday came too quickly. The morning air was thick, the kind of humid that clung to your lungs. I tried to lose myself in work, adjusting color palettes for a client who wanted something bold but timeless. My laptop hummed, but my stomach twisted tighter with each passing hour. By mid-afternoon, the sound of tires crunching gravel snapped my attention to the window. A sleek black rental car gleamed in the driveway, polished within an inch of its life. Marcus stepped out first, tall, confident, his smile wide enough to blind. Vanessa followed in oversized sunglasses and heels that looked ridiculous on our cracked sidewalk. She carried herself like she was entering a showroom, not a modest suburban house. My mother-in-law rushed past me, practically glowing. "Marcus," she cried, arms open. He hugged her theatrically, one arm still holding his phone, already halfway to his next deal. Vanessa gave me a hug that was more like a quick pat on the back, her perfume sharp and overwhelming. "So good to see you, Emmy," she said in a voice that was both polite and dismissive. James came forward, extending a hand. Marcus ignored it, pulling him into a half-hearted hug. "Little brother," he said with a smirk, as if the words themselves were a joke. Inside, the house felt instantly smaller. Marcus and Vanessa took the couch like royalty, while my mother-in-law perched beside them, glowing with pride. James and I sat opposite, the air between us charged. And then, as if rehearsed, the first blow landed. "They don't treat me right here, Marcus," my mother-in-law said, her voice thick with fake sorrow. "Always on their computers, not working real jobs. I cook, I clean." I nearly choked. She hadn't lifted a finger in months. James sat straighter, his tone calm but firm. "That's not true, Mom. We cover your expenses, your food, everything you need. Emmy works day and night to keep this house. I code all day for my startup." Marcus chuckled, leaning back. "James, you've always been a little, oblivious. And Vanessa, well, nurturing was never your strong suit, was it?" The words hit like ice water. I wanted to scream, to throw them out of my house, but my throat locked. Instead, I stood and went to put the kettle on, my hands trembling. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter, breath shallow. I could hear them laughing in the living room, my mother-in-law weaving her tale, Marcus and Vanessa feeding off it. The storm had arrived, and I was standing in the middle of it, holding nothing but a teapot. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The first dinner with Marcus and Vanessa was like sitting through a play where every actor knew their lines, but I hadn't been given a script. I moved between the kitchen and the dining table like a stagehand, carrying plates, filling glasses, smiling when I wanted to grit my teeth. The oak table that had once been a symbol of our little victories now felt like a battlefield. Marcus lounged at the head of the table, though it wasn't his seat. He hadn't asked, just claimed it with the kind of casual entitlement that comes from years of being told the world is yours. Vanessa sat to his right, scrolling through her phone between bites, offering the occasional half-hearted smile that didn't touch her eyes. My mother-in-law, practically glowing, flanked his other side, as if proximity alone proved his worth. James and I sat across from them, side by side, our knees brushing under the table like secret allies. He gave me a small squeeze when my face tightened, a reminder. We're in this together. Remember when Marcus won that science fair? My mother-in-law began, her voice syrupy with nostalgia. He built that rocket all by himself. The judges couldn't stop praising him. James stiffened. I built half that rocket. He forgot the wiring, and it wouldn't have launched. Oh, James, she said with a dismissive laugh, patting his hand like he was a child caught exaggerating. You helped a little, but it was Marcus's vision. He's always had the brilliance. Marcus smirked, not denying it, basking in the revision of history like a king accepting his crown. I swallowed hard, anger prickling beneath my skin. I wanted to shout that I'd heard these stories before, whispered late at night when James finally let the bitterness slip through his calm. Years of being the shadow to Marcus's spotlight. Years of cleaning up after his brother's messes, while their mother applauded Marcus's ambition. Brilliance, James muttered, or recklessness? Marcus leaned back, swirling the wine in his glass. Ambition, little brother. Some people have it, some people don't. Look around. You're still here, in this tiny house, fiddling with code. I'm out there taking risks, making moves. James's jaw clenched, but he didn't rise to the bait. I knew the silence cost him more than words. I set the dishes down harder than I meant to, the plates clinking against wood. Vanessa looked up briefly, her manicured brows arched in disapproval, then went back to her phone. So, Emmy. Marcus turned his attention to me, his smile wide and false. How's the, drawing thing? Still making logos for mom-and-pop shops? It's called design, I said evenly. And yes, I'm building brands, paying bills, supporting this house. My mother-in-law sniffed, unimpressed. Logos and apps, she muttered. Not real work. That did it. I felt heat rising in my chest, a pressure behind my ribs like something begging to break free. But James touched my hand again, grounding me. His eyes said, not yet. After dinner, while Marcus bragged about a new business opportunity and Vanessa critiqued the wine like she was a sommelier, I found myself thinking about the stories James had told me when we were first dating. Late-night confessions, whispered in the dark. Marcus had been the star from the beginning, firstborn, charismatic, the one teachers adored and coaches praised. He could charm his way out of detention, talk neighbors into lending him money, convince his mother that every broken promise was just a misunderstood ambition. James, younger by 3 years, was the one who stayed behind to pick up the pieces, helping their mother balance the bills when Marcus borrowed money, fixing the bike Marcus wrecked and abandoned, smoothing over the hurt their father left behind. Marcus was always chasing something, James had told me once. Glory, money, attention, it didn't matter. And Mom ate it up. She wanted to believe he was destined for greatness. I was just the backup plan, the quiet one who kept the lights on. I hadn't known what to say then, except to hold him tighter. But now, watching the scene play out at my own table, I understood the wound went deeper than I realized. James, Marcus said suddenly, breaking through my thoughts. Remember when Dad used to call you the responsible one? James gave a stiff nod. Marcus laughed, clapping him on the back. He meant boring. You never learned to take risks. That's why you'll always be small time. My stomach twisted. I glanced at James, his face a careful mask, but I saw it. The flicker of hurt, the old wound reopening. Better small time and steady than chasing scams, James said quietly. The air went sharp. Marcus's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before returning, wider and more forced. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them. My mother-in-law's knitting needles clicked faster, tension in every movement. I excused myself to the kitchen, but really, I just needed to breathe. My hands shook as I gripped the counter, the laughter from the dining room spilling into the silence like a cruel echo. That night, long after Marcus and Vanessa had retreated to the guest room, James and I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. "He'll destroy this house if we let him," I whispered. James didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "He's already trying." And as the silence stretched, I realized we were no longer just protecting our home. We were bracing for war. Saturday dawned heavy, the sky a dull gray that promised rain. I woke to the sound of voices drifting through the thin walls. My mother-in-law and Marcus, their tones animated, conspiratorial. James was already out of bed, hunched over his laptop in the corner like it could shield him from the storm brewing in the living room. "Morning," I murmured, brushing my hair back. He looked up, his eyes shadowed. "They've been up since 6, talking about condos, investments. She's convinced he's here to take her away." I pressed my lips together, the ache in my chest sharp. "And what's he really here for?" James shut the laptop. "We're about to find out." By noon, the smell of overbrewed coffee filled the house, bitter and clinging. Vanessa sat on the couch in a silk blouse that didn't fit the shabby setting, her manicured fingers scrolling her phone endlessly. Marcus stood by the window, pacing, his smile stretched too thin. My mother-in-law hovered like a child waiting for candy, her eyes alight. "Let's all sit," Marcus said finally, his tone oddly formal. He gestured toward the dining table, that same oak battlefield. James and I exchanged a wary glance, then took our seats. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table, grin wide but hollow. "So, truth is," he paused for effect, like he was on stage. "We sold the condo." The words landed like a hammer. "What?" my mother-in-law gasped, her knitting falling from her lap. "But you promised." Marcus lifted a hand. "Relax, Mom. It's just temporary. The market wasn't right, so we cashed out," Vanessa added, without looking up from her phone. "And we've been in between places. Ends are tight right now." My jaw dropped. "Tight?" I repeated. "What does that mean?" Marcus's smile sharpened. "It means we need a place to crash, just for a bit. Family helps family, right?" The air turned heavy. My mother-in-law blinked rapidly, confusion clouding her features. "So you're not taking me with you?" "Not yet. But once things settle, we'll figure it out." He turned to James. "In the meantime, we'll stay here. It'll be fun, like old times." Old times. James's face hardened, every muscle in his jaw tight. "Old times were me cleaning up your disasters." Marcus chuckled, unbothered. "Come on, little brother. Don't be dramatic. We'll chip in, make it work." But I saw it in his eyes. He had no intention of chipping in. The next morning, a moving truck rumbled into our driveway like an omen. I stood on the porch in disbelief as men hauled box after box out of the back. Furniture, clothes, even a chandelier wrapped in bubble wrap. Vanessa supervised with cool detachment, pointing at where things should go as if she owned the place. "Where are we supposed to put all this?" I whispered to James, panic rising in my throat. He shook his head. "We can't fit it all. We don't have space." My mother-in-law, standing nearby with a satisfied smirk, scoffed. "Don't talk about space. This is Marcus's future you're looking at." I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. I had poured years of sweat into buying this house, building this life, and now it was being overrun like an invasion. That's when she said it. "I've been thinking," my mother-in-law began, her voice sharp and deliberate. "We'd all be better off if Marcus and Vanessa stayed here permanently. You two freeloaders can leave." The words sliced through me like glass. James froze, a box slipping from his hands. "What?" he said, his voice low, dangerous. She didn't flinch. Her eyes pinned me like a target. "If you insist on staying, James, fine. But Emmy?" Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "She's useless. Get a divorce. Her space could hold Marcus's things." My chest went cold. The room tilted. My house, the house I had bought with sleepless nights, the house I had built brick by brick with my own sacrifices, and now it was being overrun like an invasion? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked at James, praying he would speak, praying he would fight. His face was pale, shock painted across it. Then slowly, his expression shifted, his jaw set. His eyes burned, and when he finally spoke, his voice cut through the room like a blade. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't my house. This is Emmy's house.
She bought it before we even married. Every bill, every grocery you've eaten since you moved in, that's her money. She's been carrying all of us." The room fell silent. Marcus's smirk faltered. Vanessa's eyes widened. My mother-in-law's face went slack, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, and I sat there trembling, torn between pride and fury. Pride that James had finally said it, fury that it had taken this long, because deep down, I knew this was only the first crack, and once a foundation breaks, the whole house begins to fall. The silence after James' declaration was almost louder than the words themselves. It hung in the room like smoke after a fire, stinging, choking. I sat frozen, my pulse thundering in my ears. My mother-in-law's face was a mask of disbelief. She blinked once, twice, then forced out a brittle laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. A woman doesn't buy a house. It's always the man's responsibility." James leaned forward, his voice sharp. "There's no rule like that. Emmy did this on her own. Every late night at that agency, every freelance gig, every dollar she saved, that's the reason we're even sitting under this roof." Her eyes narrowed, the denial clinging stubbornly. "You're just saying that to embarrass me." "No," James said, his voice steady now. "I'm saying it because it's the truth." I swallowed hard, heat crawling up my throat. This was what I had wanted. For him to defend me, to finally say out loud what I had carried in silence. But hearing it didn't erase the sting of being called useless, of being told I should pack up and leave my own home. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with those calculating eyes that probably conned more than a few investors. Then he smirked. "You know, Mom's not wrong about one thing." James's eyes narrowed. Marcus spread his arms, as if presenting an opportunity. "This place doesn't really fit you two. Small house, cramped rooms, not exactly the picture of success. But Vanessa and I," he gestured toward his wife, who looked up from her phone long enough to flash a thin smile, "we could do something with this place. Renovate, expand, make it worthy of its potential." My heart plummeted. "What are you saying?" Marcus's grin widened, slick and unshakable. "Why don't you sell it to us? You two could find an apartment that suits your lifestyle. We'll take over the mortgage, make it shine, give Mom the comfort she deserves. Everybody wins." I stared at him, stunned. The audacity, the arrogance. He wasn't asking, he was circling, like a vulture eyeing something already dead. James slammed his palm on the table, the sound sharp enough to make Vanessa flinch. "Absolutely not." "Why not?" Marcus asked smoothly. "It'll be a smart move. You wouldn't have to worry about upkeep, property taxes, all the grown-up stuff. Emmy can keep playing with her logos, you can keep coding in a corner, and we'll handle the real responsibilities." The insult burned. My fingers dug into my knees under the table, holding myself back from lashing out. "This is our home," I said finally, my voice shaking but firm. "Not yours, not hers, ours." Marcus chuckled, shaking his head like I was a child who didn't understand the rules of the game. "You're too emotional, Emmy. Business is business." James's chair scraped back as he stood, his shoulders squared. "This isn't business. This is family, and you're not going to bully us into giving up what we've built." My mother-in-law, still reeling from the revelation about the house, suddenly perked up, her voice trembling with a strange, hopeful desperation. "Marcus, tell me you'll at least take me with you when you buy it. I can't stay here another day with them." Marcus reached over, patting her hand like he was sealing a deal. "Of course, Mom. You'll be with us. You belong with winners." The words twisted in my gut. My house, my sacrifice, my blood and sweat. And in one casual sentence, he had erased me from it, written me out of my own life. The dam inside me cracked. "Get out," I whispered. The room went still. Vanessa's eyes darted toward Marcus. My mother-in-law's knitting needles clattered to the floor. "Excuse me?" Marcus asked, his smirk faltering. I stood, my hands trembling, but my voice louder now. "Get out. You don't get to walk in here, dump your problems on us, and then try to steal the one thing I worked my whole life for. Not this time." Marcus's face hardened, the charm slipping. "Careful, Emmy. You don't want to make enemies in your own family." James stepped beside me, his hand on my shoulder. His voice was steel. "She's not the enemy here. You are." For a moment, no one moved. The storm raged between us, every unspoken wound and betrayal crackling in the air. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about survival. After that night, the house changed. It wasn't sudden, like a door slamming shut. It was slower, more insidious, like mold creeping through the walls. Every corner of the place I had once called a sanctuary now felt like it was watching me, waiting for the next fight to break out. Marcus didn't leave, neither did Vanessa. Their things spilled across the living room, boxes stacked high against the wall, expensive furniture shoved into corners where it didn't belong. Our small home groaned under their presence. The chandelier Marcus insisted on keeping leaned awkwardly against the hallway wall, absurd and mocking, a monument to his excess. Meals turned into silent wars. My mother-in-law always took Marcus's side, her barbed comments sharper than ever. "You should thank Marcus," she said one morning as I rinsed dishes. "He's showing you what success looks like. Maybe you'll learn something." I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted blood. James tried to hold the line, but the weight was grinding him down. He worked long hours at his laptop, code flickering across his screen like a lifeline. At night, he'd rub his temples, his voice low. "They're not leaving," he said. "Marcus will keep pushing until there's nothing left." "I know," I whispered. "But what do we do?" For the first time, he didn't have an answer. Vanessa wasn't loud, but she didn't need to be. Her presence was a constant judgment. She'd wrinkle her nose at my thrifted decorations, glance at my laptop with thinly veiled disdain, scroll her phone while muttering things like, "We had better furniture and storage." Once I found her rearranging the living room. She'd pushed our modest couch against the wall and was trying to fit one of their oversized armchairs into the space. "What are you doing?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice even. She smiled sweetly, though her eyes were sharp. "Just making it feel more balanced, don't you think?" I clenched my fists. "This isn't your house." She shrugged. "Not yet." The worst came from my mother-in-law. She'd always been critical, but now she was emboldened, like Marcus's presence gave her a crown to wear. She followed me around the kitchen, sighing dramatically. "You know, Marcus and Vanessa could take good care of this place," she said one evening. "You and James, you're just playing house. It takes real people to build a future." I spun on her, my voice trembling. "I built this house. Every dollar, every sleepless night, every ounce of me went into this place." She smirked, her eyes glinting. "And yet here you are, one word away from losing it." Her cruelty hit harder than any insult Marcus could throw, because deep down, she wasn't just trying to wound me. She wanted to erase me. The days blurred into one another, tension ratcheting higher. Marcus made calls in the living room, his voice booming as he pitched investors on schemes that sounded hollow even to my eyes. Vanessa floated through the house like it was a showroom, complaining about space, about lighting, about how we lacked vision. And my mother-in-law, she whispered plans to Marcus when she thought we couldn't hear. I caught fragments in the hallways. "Emmy's not cut out for this. James will fold eventually. You and Vanessa deserve better." James tried to shield me, but I saw the toll in his eyes too. Every jab, every insult landed on him too. He'd clench my hand under the table during meals, his silent way of saying, "Hold on, we'll survive this." But I was starting to wonder how much more we could take. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. The four of them sat at the table, Marcus laying out what he called the future. "We'll remodel the kitchen," he said, sketching with a pen on the back of a napkin. "Open it up, add an island. Vanessa wants a walk-in closet in the master. We'll need to knock down a wall or two." My stomach turned. He was talking about tearing apart the very walls I had fought so hard to buy. "And where exactly do James and I fit into this?" I asked, my voice sharp. Marcus didn't even look up. "You don't. That's the point. You two should think about moving out sooner rather than later. We'll handle things from here." James slammed his fist against the table, the sound rattling the dishes. "Enough. This isn't your house. You don't get to come in here and rewrite our lives. My mother-in-law sneered, her voice dripping venom. He's doing what you never could, James, building something real. That was it. The dam burst. I want real, I shouted, standing so fast my chair scraped across the floor. I bought this house. I kept this family afloat while Marcus was out burning bridges, and now you want to erase me from my own life? Over my dead body. The room erupted. Marcus's smug denial, Vanessa's scoff, my mother-in-law's shrill accusations. But I didn't hear them. My pulse drowned it all out because in that moment, I realized we weren't just under siege. We were already losing, and unless we acted soon, there wouldn't be anything left to fight for.
The morning after that dinner, I woke with a knot in my chest so heavy it felt like someone had pressed a stone against me while I slept. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that feels staged, like everyone is waiting for the next explosion. James wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen, sitting at the table with his head in his hands, a cup of coffee going cold in front of him. Couldn't sleep? I asked softly. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. I kept replaying it all, them sitting there, talking about remodeling your house like we were squatters. I can't keep doing this, Emmy. We're suffocating. The truth sat between us, raw and undeniable. We had reached a line that couldn't be crossed without breaking. That day, everything seemed sharper. Marcus's laughter grated louder. Vanessa's perfume clung thicker. My mother-in-law's sighs cut deeper. Every sound was amplified by the knowledge that our home, my sanctuary, was no longer ours. It was a stage for their ambitions. Marcus spent the morning pacing the living room on his phone. Yeah, we're in a new place, he bragged to whoever was on the line. Plenty of space, plenty of potential. You'll see when you visit. Visit? My stomach dropped. He was already parading our home as if it belonged to him. Vanessa sorted through boxes, pulling out expensive dishes and placing them on my counters, shoving aside the mismatched plates James and I had picked out at a yard sale. She looked at me with a cool smile. No offense, Emmy, but your stuff feels temporary. This house deserves better. And my mother-in-law? She sat in her chair like a queen on her throne, basking in the chaos. Every time Marcus spoke, she beamed with pride, as if she hadn't just shattered her other son to feed the golden child's ego. By evening, the tension had coiled so tightly it was bound to snap. James and I sat on the porch swing, the creak of the chains the only sound between us. "We can't win here," James said finally, his voice hoarse. I turned to him, startled. "What do you mean?" "They won't stop. Marcus won't stop. Mom won't stop. They'll pick at us until there's nothing left of this house or us. We have to leave." The words hit me harder than any insult. Leave? This was the house I had fought for. The proof of every sacrifice. The thought of walking away felt like tearing out part of my soul. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "If we leave, they win. They'll take everything I built." James grabbed my hand, his grip fierce. "They're already taking it. Emmy, listen to me. This isn't about the house anymore. It's about us. I'd rather lose 4 walls than lose you." Tears stung my eyes. His voice cracked, but his conviction was unshakable. For the first time, I saw the man who had always cleaned up Marcus's messes finally choosing himself, choosing me. We walked back inside, hand in hand. The 3 of them were at the dining table again, Marcus scribbling numbers on a pad, Vanessa scrolling, my mother-in-law watching like a hawk. James didn't hesitate. His voice rang out, steady and strong. "We're done." Marcus looked up, smirking. "Done with what?" "With you. With all of this. Emmy and I are leaving. The house, the mortgage, the bills, they're yours now. You want it so badly? Take it." The silence that followed was electric. My mother-in-law blinked, stunned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Emmy and I won't let you destroy us. You think she's useless? She built this life while you sat here tearing her down. And if you want to believe Marcus is your savior, fine, let him prove it." Marcus's smirk faltered. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't just—" "Yes, we can," I interrupted, my voice shaking but fierce. "We're walking away, but don't come running when Marcus's schemes collapse again, because they will." Vanessa finally looked up, her face pale. She said nothing, but her silence was louder than any protest. My mother-in-law sputtered, rage coloring her cheeks. "Good riddance. You two were holding him back anyway." But her voice trembled, and I saw it. the flicker of fear. She knew, deep down, Marcus was no savior. That night, James and I began packing. Clothes, laptops, the little things that made our house a home. Each item I placed in a box felt like a goodbye. I walked through the kitchen where I'd burned my first attempt at peach cobbler for James, the hallway where we'd painted walls in mismatched strokes, laughing until our arms ached, the porch swing where we'd planned a future. It was like leaving pieces of myself behind, but I knew if I stayed, there'd be nothing left of me. James slipped his arm around my waist as we loaded the car. "We'll make a new home," he whispered. "One they can't touch." I nodded, my heart breaking and healing all at once, because this wasn't defeat. It was survival, and sometimes walking away is the only way to win. The night we decided to leave, I thought I'd cry. I thought the walls would echo with heartbreak, that I'd collapse under the weight of everything I had built here. Instead, I felt strangely calm, like a storm that had finally spent itself. We packed in silence, the kind that says everything words can't. James folded clothes into boxes with mechanical precision, while I wrapped mugs and picture frames in old newspapers. Each item told a story: the chipped blue vase from the yard sale, the mismatched plates from our first market trip, the lamp that had lit my late-night design sessions. Memories were tucked into cardboard, sealed with tape, each strip a farewell. The house looked different without our things, hollow, stripped bare. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter one last time, remembering the mornings I'd leaned there sipping coffee, the nights I'd leaned there crying from exhaustion, the afternoons filled with laughter when James and I made sandwiches in between deadlines. It wasn't just a house. It was a chronicle of our love, and we were leaving it behind. Marcus swaggered through the living room as we packed, his grin smug. "Smart choice," he said, clapping James on the shoulder. "You two weren't cut out for homeownership anyway. I'll make this place shine. You'll see." James didn't flinch. He didn't answer. He just kept folding, the silence louder than any argument. Vanessa hovered nearby, quieter than usual. She offered no smirks, no judgments, just watched with a strange unease in her eyes. For the first time, I wondered if she was starting to see the cracks in Marcus's facade. My mother-in-law, though, reveled in it. She perched in her chair, her smile wide and cruel. "Finally, things will be done properly around here. Marcus will make sure of it. And you, James," she shook her head, disappointment dripping from her tone. "You were always too soft. Emmy was never a match for you. It's for the best." Her words should have broken me, but instead they hardened something inside me. I met her gaze, steady and unwavering. "You'll regret this." Her smile faltered, just slightly. By dawn, the car was loaded. James stood on the porch, staring at the swing we had shared so many evenings. His hand brushed the chain, the metal creaking softly, a mournful goodbye. "You ready?" I asked. He turned to me, his eyes heavy but resolute. "As ready as I'll ever be." We climbed into the car, the engine rumbling to life. My mother-in-law watched from the doorway, arms crossed as if she were seeing off unwanted guests. Marcus stood behind her, still grinning, though it looked thinner now, strained. Vanessa didn't come to the door at all. As we pulled out of the driveway, my chest tightened. I looked back once, at the house I had poured my soul into. The maple tree framed the front window, its leaves trembling in the morning breeze. For a second, I imagined the house itself watching us leave, aching as much as I did. Then I faced forward, the road stretching out before us. The apartment we found wasn't much. 2 rooms, a tiny balcony, walls that smelled faintly of paint. But when we set down our boxes, I felt something unexpected. Relief. James pulled me into his arms, resting his forehead against mine. "We're free now, Emmy. Just us." Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't just from sadness. For the first time in months, I could breathe. We set up slowly, carefully. My desk by the window, his laptop in the corner, the blue vase on the kitchen table, still chipped, still perfect. We cooked pasta that first night, laughing when we realized we'd forgotten to buy salt. We ate on the floor, plates balanced on our knees, the city lights blinking outside the window. It wasn't the house I had dreamed of, but it was ours. Untouched, safe. And for now, That was enough. But peace never lasts forever. A week later, James's phone rang. His mother's voice, frantic and trembling, poured through the speaker. "Marcus is gone," she sobbed. "He took my pension, everything, for one of his startups, and now he's disappeared." James's hand tightened around the phone, his knuckles white. I closed my eyes, my stomach twisting. I had known this moment would come. Marcus's schemes always collapsed, and now the storm we had escaped was about to consume them all.
The call from James's mother lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Even after he hung up, the echoes of her sobbing seemed to rattle against the walls of our little apartment. "She gave him everything," James muttered, staring at the phone as if it had betrayed him. "Her pension, her savings, all of it. And now he's vanished." I stood by the window, gripping the sill. Outside, cars hummed down the street, ordinary lives unfolding, while ours twisted in the shadow of Marcus's choices. "I warned her," I said quietly, not out of cruelty, but with a hollow ache. "We both did. She didn't want to listen." James rubbed his face with both hands, exhaustion heavy in his voice. "And now it's happening all over again. He takes, he destroys, and everyone else has to pick up the pieces." I wanted to comfort him, to say it wasn't his responsibility anymore. But I knew, no matter how far we'd run, the wreckage Marcus left behind would always touch us somehow. Days passed, and news trickled in like drops of poison. Vanessa called next, her tones stripped of arrogance. "I can't live like this," she said, her voice shaky. "My parents cut me off after Marcus sold the condo. I don't even know how to report him missing. He left me with debts, with nothing." James's face was hard, his jaw clenched. "Call the police," he said flatly. "That's all you can do." And then he hung up. I stood in the kitchen, the weight of her desperation sinking in. For so long, Vanessa had floated above us, smug and untouchable. Now she was sinking. Her mask cracked. Part of me felt sympathy, but a larger part whispered that this was justice, the price of siding with a fraud. It wasn't long before word spread through distant cousins and family whispers. Marcus had been arrested in Florida. Fraud, scams, unpaid debts, the charges stacked like bricks on his back. It wasn't his first brush with the law, but this time there was no charming his way out. He was facing real jail time. When James read the news aloud, his voice was steady, but his eyes gave him away. Relief, bitterness, grief for a brother who had never truly been a brother. My mother-in-law, meanwhile, was left in ruins. With her pension gone, she had no choice but to take a part-time job at a grocery store, bagging groceries for neighbors who pitied her. Marcus had promised her comfort. Instead, he'd left her with humiliation. And Vanessa, stripped of luxury, she found work through a temp agency, typing reports in an office that smelled of stale coffee. It was her first real job, and by all accounts, she hated every second. The irony was brutal. The very woman who had sneered at my designs, who called James's coding not real work, was now clinging to minimum wage just to survive. James and I watched it all unfold from the safety of our small apartment. There was no satisfaction in seeing his family crumble, not really. Just a quiet, bittersweet justice. "They tried to take everything from us," I said one evening, as we sat on our tiny balcony. The city buzzed below, a hum of life moving on. "They tried to live the very life they mocked us for." James exhaled, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon, "and we're free." The word hung in the air, fragile but true. A week later, his mother called again. Her voice was smaller this time, frayed at the edges. "James," she whispered, "I don't know what to do. I can't pay the bills. Marcus, he promised me." James cut her off, his tone calm but firm. "He promised a lot of things, Mom, and you chose to believe him. Emmy and I warned you. We begged you not to trust him." She sniffled, silence on the line. "We can't help you this time. We won't. You called Emmy useless in her own home. You told me to leave her, but she's the one who saved us. If you want to rebuild, you'll have to do it yourself." And for the first time, James didn't waver. He didn't fold under guilt or obligation. He chose us. When he hung up, I reached for his hand, tears stinging my eyes. Not for his mother, not for Marcus, but for him, for us.
for the fact that we had finally cut the chain. That night, I lay awake in our new home, listening to the city outside. We had lost the house, yes, but what we gained was bigger: freedom, clarity, and each other. Marcus had fallen, his empire of lies crumbling into dust. His mother and wife were paying the price of blind loyalty, and James and I, we were rebuilding, brick by brick, on a foundation no one could shake. Because in the end, success isn't measured by square footage or chandeliers. It's measured by peace, by love, by choosing to walk away before the storm destroys you. And for the first time in months, I finally felt at peace.
The weeks after Marcus's arrest were strangely quiet. For so long, our lives had been wrapped in the chaos of his schemes, my mother-in-law's barbs and Vanessa's cold judgments, that silence felt almost unnatural. But in our small apartment, with boxes half unpacked and sunlight spilling through the blinds, silence became a kind of medicine. I set up my desk by the window. It wasn't much, just a sturdy table, my laptop, and a small plant I picked up at the market. But when I opened Illustrator, the hum of creation returned. I took on new clients, a bakery downtown wanting a fresh brand, a startup needing an identity that didn't feel soulless. Each project became a stitch, sewing me back together. Every invoice paid wasn't just money, it was proof that I was never useless, never the burden they said I was. James thrived too. Without the constant weight of Marcus hovering over him, he poured himself into his code with a new fire. His team noticed promotions, raises, respect, the recognition he'd always deserved but had never demanded. Some nights he'd lean back in his chair, stretch, and say with a grin, "Feels good not cleaning up someone else's mess for once." Our apartment became a place of laughter. Tiny, imperfect, but ours. We cooked together, burning more meals than we perfected, but laughing through every failure. We sat on the balcony with mugs of tea, trading dreams about the future. Maybe another house one day. Maybe travel. Maybe just this: peace. The weight that had crushed us in the old house was gone. No more barbed comments over dinner. No more smug smirks in the living room. No more feeling like strangers in the home I had built. Instead, there was us. Just us. And for the first time, it was enough.
We still heard about them, of course. Family gossip traveled fast. Vanessa's temp job barely covered rent. My mother-in-law's pride took blow after blow as she bagged groceries for people she used to boast to. And Marcus, locked away, was no longer the golden boy, but just another man who thought charm could replace character. Sometimes, guilt would flicker across James's face when he read the updates, but I'd remind him, we tried. We gave them chances. They chose their path. And slowly, he stopped looking back. Because the truth was simple. You can't save people who don't want to be saved. One night, as we sat on our balcony under the glow of string lights James had hung up, I asked him, "Do you miss the house?"
And that's the lesson, isn't it? Houses can crumble, families can betray, and dreams can be stolen. But peace, love, the quiet strength of choosing yourself over chaos, that can't be taken. So, to anyone listening, anyone who's ever been told they're not enough, who's ever been erased in their own life, remember this: you are not defined by their judgments. You are not bound by their expectations. You are the architect of your own peace. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away.
So what do you think? Was Emmy right to walk away and let Marcus and her mother-in-law face the consequences of their own choices? Or should she have fought harder to keep her home? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story powerful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life tales of betrayal, resilience, and justice. Until next time, remember, your peace is priceless, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away.